Hello everyone, my name is Matthew Taylor and welcome to our Autumn Bush broadcast. I'm joining you today from the Victorian Goldfields northwest of Melbourne on our Nardoo Hills Reserve. And we're on the lands of the Judjurrung people, who are traditional custodians of this country I'm on today. And I'd like to pay my respect to their elders, both past and present, and extend that respect to any Indigenous Australians online with us today. We, of course, recognise the remarkable Australian environment that we strive to conserve is on land that has never been ceded. And it's our future and the responsibility of all Australians working together to look after it. Healthy country, protected forever. So welcome, everybody. A little warning in advance. This is our first bush broadcast that we're doing live from the reserve. So we're sitting on Nardoo Hills Reserve on a little table. We're plugged into a hotspot, and the reason it's not perfect imagery is because it's a very bright, shiny day. But bear with us. If we have any technical hitches, I'm sure we'll fix them as we go along. As usual, if you've got any questions, please use the chat function, not the Q&A, the chat function at the bottom right of your screen. And please say good day and where you're from. And if you've got any questions during the webinar, please stick them in there and we'll get them to them at the Q&A session at the end. The reason we're here is this year marks the 20th anniversary of Bush Heritage acquiring Nardoo Hills. And that was made possible thanks to funds from the Commonwealth's National Reserve System programme, as well, of course, from some of our very generous supporters who chipped in. We're situated in the Goldfields region, and it's a reserve that plays a vital role in connecting country, which is very fragmented. We've got a mixture of box ironbark forests and various types of grassy box woodlands here. And the reserves that Bush Heritage owns are vital in supporting landscape connectivity and connecting up with other land that's in the National Parks estate. Here at Nardoo Hills, we've got Judith Eardley Reserve and the Barnet Block, which are acquired at different times. And we're protecting temperate woodlands, which are the most threatened wooded ecosystem in Australia, which is home to more than 110 bird species. I've managed to get about 30 since I arrived here yesterday, and I'll introduce you to Rowan and Dan in a minute, who are going to hopefully help me find a few more before we finish the webinar. We've had some dry weather patterns, and that means that's led to a dramatic reduction in woodland birds pretty much across Australia, and even things that birders and locals would consider to be common birds, things like red wattlebirds, spotted pardalotes, and rufous whistlers, they're all on the decline, and we're not certain entirely why. What we are doing is working with traditional custodians, with farmers, landholders, and other organisations to reverse this decline of these threatened species and reconnect all the remaining good habitat in the Kawarrka-Wedderburn landscape. So we've got a lot to get through today. I'm going to kick things off by introducing our two guests. Sitting alongside me, we have Dan Nugent, Reserve Manager for Victoria. Wave, Dan, let us know. Fantastic. And Rowan Mott, our ecologist for Victoria. Hi, Rowan.
Morning, everyone.
And I'm going to have to lean in order for the audio to work. We've tested that, so for my face looming large. But let's get on with the things. Dan, as Reserve Manager, you probably know Nardu better than most people. Can you paint us a picture of this landscape and the vegetation communities to help people get a feel for what we're sitting on?
Sure. Yeah, I think you alluded to it before, but yeah, in this part of north central Victoria, we're in a pretty heavily cleared landscape. And a lot of that clearing was done historically for things like agriculture, gold mining, timber harvesting. But fortunately for the plants and animals here at Nardoo Hills, it escaped the worst of those impacts. And what we're able to protect here is probably some of the best, most species-rich and intact grasses likely to find anywhere in southeast Australia. It's a real treasure of a place. So if you look out behind me, what you can see is hollow-bearing eucalypts. You have things like yellow box, yellow gums, grey box, and below those trees, you have this nice open grassy, herb-rich and lily-filled understory. And there's also plenty of large fallen timber, which makes great habitat for animals. So if you kind of head down west and north of the edges of the reserve, off the rocky rolling hills, you also head out onto some of the plains country where you find some ancient bull oaks. And then if you head kind of to the eastern fall of the hills, you also land in some of the box ironbark country and mallee shrubland. So it's got a great diversity of other habitats as well, and other amazing natural features, such as we've got a natural wetland spring, which we protect here on the reserve. And on top of all those other biodiversity values, we also have a lot of cultural heritage, and Jar Jarong have a deep connection to this part of the landscape. It forms part of their dreaming. So yeah, it's a lot of wonderful things that make up Nardoo Hills.
It certainly is a lovely space. I had a wander around with Rowan yesterday. He was kind enough to show me the springs and the habitat here, and it really is gorgeous. So, Rowan, a question for you. There are numerous species that Nardu supports, things like lace monitors. I think we just saw a picture of that, and fat-tailed dunlets and chocolate wattlebats. Very tasty sounding critters, I have to say. And of course, kangaroos, but the particular significance is woodland birds, isn't it? Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, the reserve has some really amazing woodland birds. I was lucky enough to be out last spring doing surveys every morning. I guess some people wouldn't say it's lucky to have to get up at 4 a.m. to get out here for the crack of dawn and the dawn chorus. But getting out there really gave me a good opportunity to see some really amazing species. I have seen more than 100 species on the hills. And yeah, it's just going to find. Just yesterday, I flushed a southern boobook, a small type of owl, and then shortly after that, an owlet nightjar. So yeah, that's just the sort of things that turn up day in, day out. But in particular, we hold a number of threatened species like the brown tree creeper, which is just gone off your screen there. The subspecies we get here is now listed as a threatened species across the nation. We also have hooded robins, and the subspecies we get is now classified as endangered across the nation. Diamond firetails are a particular favourite of mine. They're listed as vulnerable. And then we also have other things like there have been swift parrots reported on the reserve. They're critically endangered, and also things like blue-wing parrots that occasionally turn up from time to time, and they're also a threat species. So yeah, there's a really good base level of birds on the reserve, and some particularly key things that we're really striving to protect here.
That's fantastic, Rowan. And I think it'd be worth, Dan, can you tell us a bit about the threats to some of these birds and some of the other wildlife here?
Yeah, sure. At Nardoo Hills, there's a range of historical artifacts of previous land uses that are threatening the values, but there's also new and emerging threats. One of the biggest threats that we're working on at the moment is soil and hydrological dysfunction. And that plays a really big role in how the ecosystem has resilience to disturbances and things like drought. So it's the ability of plants and animals to bounce back after something like a drought. When you don't have your soil and hydrological processes functioning properly, it can really just threaten the whole balance of things. So particularly at Nardoo Hills, what we've seen is through historical tree clearing and shrub clearing, as well as livestock grazing, the soil health has really declined. So instead of before those disturbances, soils would act more like a sponge, where you have rainfall that soaks deep into the soil and it's slowly expelled, and the plants and a rather compacted surface, and it just sheets off really quickly. Doesn't soak into the ground. It causes erosion, and it just flushes out of the system without giving the plants an opportunity to really use it. So a big focus of ours is trying to slow that movement of surface water, both in the gully systems and trying to pull it up and letting it get soaked back into the system. So a lot of that work is forming part of a pilot project called Spring Paddock Watershed Repair. And yeah, we're doing a bunch of things to try and slow that water down. So that yeah, soil and hydrology is a big focus in this semi-arid climate. As well as those processes, we've also got overabundant native animals on the property. So here in Nardoo Hills, we have rather high population numbers of kangaroos. So what we're seeing is the kangaroo numbers reaching levels where we're seeing real negative impacts on plant communities. So their richness, their diversity, and their structure is being impacted. We're just seeing less kind of grass and food for other animals. It's impacting soil health and also threatening things like some of our endangered orchids. Really valuable. And yeah, this issue isn't isolated to Nardoo Hills. It's a problem you see across most grassy ecosystems in Australia. It's really a symptom of an ecosystem being out of balance. So where we've lost that top-down pressure from dingoes are no longer here. There's no longer traditional hunting by traditional custodians, and there's also plenty of water and food. They thrive under those conditions. So we're working really hard on the reserve to monitor numbers and to apply management, which is guided by the best available science and tools. So yeah, that's something that is an ongoing, but it's more of an emerging new threat. And flowing on from that is another is something that's missing is cultural fire. In this landscape has been excluded for a long time. Where we're sitting in these grassy woodlands, frequent fire is really important to maintaining health. It stimulates germination. It just generally keeps things in balance, the shrub and tree dynamic and the grass dynamic in the right balance. But fire's been excluded for a very long time in this landscape. But fortunately, we've built a really strong relationship with JARA, and we're bringing cultural fire. JARA's bringing the cultural fire back into this landscape. So that's we're going to see really positive results from that. And then finally, reserves, we've got a suite of weed issues, and probably the biggest challenge for us is something called a wheel cactus. It's a really spiky, hard to kill thing that quickly invades landscapes and transforms the structure. It's come from Mexico. It's not native at all. But yeah, we're working away. We've got great people, volunteers who come out and help, as well as contractors. So we're getting on top of that, and once we're hoping to expand that treatment across the landscape. So yeah, we've certainly got our hands full with plenty of threats here at Nardoo Hills.
Thanks, Dan. And on my little tour yesterday, I saw some of your handiwork. I was asking Rowan why the wheel cactus had little pink paint. Someone had been being artistic with the pink paint, which I understand is what you do once you've stabbed it with the poison that you have to use to kill it. So it's great to see that you know that one, even though it looks healthy, it's going to be gone pretty soon. Yeah. And you've got a pretty good bunch of volunteers, haven't you, that have to get themselves, they have a huge amount of personal protective gear, don't they?
Yeah.
Otherworldly, don't they?
Yeah. We're not taking too many chances.
The wheel stabbing gang, if you ever see a picture of them, they're in bright fluoro orange protective gear, walking through with a backpack and a stabber, stabbing every single bit of those wheel cactus circles, because each one has to receive a little dose of poison, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It's time consuming and you're working over rocky terrain, but people like seeing the results.
But that's something that the pastoralists around and the traditional owners are very keen on, isn't it, with the wheel cactus, because nearby Mount Bunyal property is infested with them, isn't it? And it's the whole neighbourhood is being getting more and more from birds moving the seeds around, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big reminder in the landscape of the need to really stay on top of weeds like wheel cactus. If you let them go, then they can really consume and impact everything in the landscape. So we're working really hard to to show leadership in getting on top of a landscape issue in that weed.
Yeah, fantastic. That collaboration with other landowners, of course, is critical to all the work we do at Bush Heritage so that we can improve the broadest possible area. And the wheel cactus is certainly one of those, isn't it, that'll help. I think Nardoo Hills, probably more than any of our reserves, is at the forefront of that. So, Rowan, could you tell us about the Climate Ready Revegetation Project? We have touched on it before, but I saw it in action yesterday, and I think you told me some interesting facts about where we're at with that project.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, on the reserve about a decade ago now, we had a eucalypt dieback event following on from a heat wave. It led to lots of the canopy of the old mature yellow box and some grey box dying back, and this prompted reserve staff and ecologists within the Bush Heritage family to kind of develop this new program where we sourced seed from areas with a hotter, dry climate than is currently experienced at Nardoo Hills, in the hope of kind of future-proofing the vegetation on the property by bringing in genes that are more adapted to those hotter, drier areas. So that culminated in more than 11,500 trees being planted in experimental plots. Some of them sourced from places like Griffith and Corn over near the Flinders Ranges in South here, and as well as some seed sourced from the local area as well, as a bit of a comparison. And those trees have been monitored at least annually since they went into the ground in 2019 and 2020. And we've actually got another monitoring event coming up next month, which we're really looking forward to getting into and seeing where the plants are up to. But the last round of monitoring, some of the trees are more than 4 meters tall now. It's quite phenomenal how rapidly they've taken off. But somewhat surprisingly, perhaps, the locally sourced seed is actually doing as good or better than the climate adjusted provenances. And we think that there's a couple of factors at play in that. It might be that the last few years have been relatively wet and mild years, so the trees haven't been exposed to the pressures that they may be in the future. But also we might be seeing some sorts of local adaptations where those trees might be more suited to the soil conditions in the earlier years. And until we really start seeing those additional pressures of climate change, that we are yet to see any competitive advantage from the climate adjusted provenances coming into play.
And Rowan, one of the things you mentioned to me yesterday was that a bit like humans, the being tested may be different when you're an infant or juvenile or when you're an adult tree. So I guess we need some very dry years to really learn a bit more about this, don't we?
Yeah, it's kind of a strange thing that we might be crossing our fingers for hot and dry years for that experiment, whereas everything else on the reserve we're really hoping for rain and mild conditions. So yeah,
fantastic. Well, I caught up during the week with one of our colleagues, Monique Miller, who is a great fan of orchids. And the reason we want to bring you a piece on that is that Nardu is also renowned for some not only incredibly rare, but incredibly beautiful orchids. And Monique wasn't able to join us today, but here's a little video clip that I recorded with her last week. Hi, Monique. Great to see you again.
Hi.
Listen, we'd love to know a bit about the country you're working on, and perhaps you could explain what being a restoration project officer is, first of all.
Being a restoration project officer means that I just get to play with plants all the time. I'm particularly looking at rare and declining flora in the Karakara Wedderburn landscape.
Oh, fantastic. Well, that leads us inevitably to orchids, doesn't it? Which I know is one of your great loves. So perhaps you could tell us about some of the amazing species that are found at Nardoo Hills.
Yeah, I think that For any plant nerd, orchids are a favorite because they're so interesting and cryptic. And I always make the joke that they're from outer space. So, you know, they don't exist without a mycorrhizal fungi relationship. So they have a symbiotic relationship with fungi in the ground. And that relationship is very much a part of their process of germinating, because the hyphae, so like the little kind of fungi fingers, have to actually pierce the seed of an orchid. And we're talking terrestrial orchids here. So these are ones that do occur in the ground. There's so many orchids in Australia. There's 1,200 different types of orchids, and some of them have relationships with trees, some have relationships with things in the soil, and they grow on trees, they grow on rocks, like they're wild. But all of the ones we have in Australia, I mean in Victoria, sorry, they're all terrestrial ones that we have on our reserves. And we have some really rare ones. So we have the Diurus protenna, which is the northern golden moth orchids. And we have a really big colony of them on Nardoo Hills. So there's about 1,000 individuals, probably more now. And they're these beautiful yellow orchids. They have a stem that's about 15 centimeters long. And when they're all out in flower, it's a pretty incredible sight to see. And now these are pollinated by insects, like a lot of orchids are, but some orchids are also known to self-pollinate, particularly sun orchids. So we also, this one is, it's endangered in Victoria. It's only got really small numbers, and it only occurs in the kind of goldfields bioregion, that central Victoria kind of area. We also have the this really alien looking one. I absolutely love this orchid. It's a robust green hood, so it's Pterostylis pallida. It was thought to be extinct until 2009, when it was actually rediscovered on Nardoo Hills, which is really, really cool. Previous sightings like date back to the 1940s, and then it was really thought to be extinct. Yeah. So it's really, really special that we have a small colony on Nardoo Hills. And I've personally seen that orchid myself. And they're so incredible. That's it's nationally listed as critically endangered, and in Victoria it's classified as endangered. So yeah, we pay a lot of attention to where these orchids are on country, and yeah, try to look out for them all the time. And then we have some other orchids that aren't listed, but they're no less, unique and special. So this is Glossodia major, the wax lip orchid. It's incredible color, this like sort of royal purple color. Yeah. And also these orchids generally are coming out sort of late winter to early spring. You sort of get a big flush of orchids from about June. That's the earliest. So we get these, the bluebeard orchids are probably one of my favorites because it looks like a fuzzy alien, like an alien sea creature. It's got this amazing sort of face to it with its like little beard. They're incredible. And this is a different kind of Diurus, which is quite a common orchid, and they're beautiful to see. Leopard orchid, the Diurus pardoner are absolutely glorious. And then we get tiny orchids as well, because these are all sort of like, you can spot them quite easily. But this one on the left here is the Caladinia priscilla, the tiny fingers orchid. And I use my finger to show the scale of this orchid, and you would miss them so easily. Caladinia is quite a large orchid family. And then we get the onion orchids. So they're like these multi-headed flowers. I've got a photo somewhere of one with an ant, and the ant is basically the size of one of the flowers, which are really cool. And then on the other side is, it's a swan green hood orchid. So it's the same family as Pterostylis pallida, but it's incredibly different form. And this one's starting to finish, it's quite pale. And a lot of the bottom flowers, you can see that they're closed up. So they've actually already been pollinated. And so they've closed, and they're starting to produce seeds within the ovary of the flower, which is really great to see.
Some fantastic plants there. And what are we doing to protect them at Nardoo?
Nice. It's a really good question. And I think the main thing is that we've acquired the property and we've stopped it from continuing to be farmed. So one of the biggest threats to orchids is grazing by sheep. Sheep will compact the soil, but they also eat off the orchid heads before they can pollinate and reproduce. So the fact that we own the land means that, one, there's no more grazing. Two, there's no more clearing and land disturbance. And also we are actively trying to keep down the weeds that can choke out the areas where the orchids grow. Also, we are monitoring the orchids. So we have an external orchid specialist ecologist who comes in and will actually do orchid counts every year. So we know that like they're continuing to be pollinated, to reproduce and grow in number, because one of the biggest threats to them is actually genetic inbreeding, essentially. Yeah. So that's really important, and we do know that their numbers are growing. And even in special cases for like particularly rare plants, our external ecologist will come in and hand pollinate things and also collect seeds. So she'll actually grow orchids back at her sort of like her lab at her house, which also involves taking soil with her, because again that mycorrhizal fungi relationship is so important. So you actually have to grow them in soil that has the correct fungus in them to get them to germinate and come to fruition.
You're referring to the orchid whisperer Julie Radford there, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
I
Yes.
thought you might be.
Who well, I'm like aspiring to be when I grow up.
Excellent. Well, clearly, orchids are something that bring out the obsessives in people, and it's lovely to hear such good stories of how they're thriving on Nardoo Hill. So thanks very much for giving us that little insight, Monique, and I look forward to spring walk with you at some point soon.
Yeah, sounds great.
Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Bye. That was a little set of stories from Monique there about the wonderful orchids. Sadly, it's not orchid season at the moment, but in springtime, this part of the world is magnificent for orchids. Now, I'm going to move on and ask Dan about some of the watershed repairs that were mentioned earlier, and spring paddock that we talked about. Dan, can you just describe that project and what its aims are and the work undertaken so far? And you might want to reference one of the questions we've had through asks about watershed repairs we're doing elsewhere, like at Bulkamata in South Australia, and how much we share, knowledge and information about that.
Sure. Yeah, no, this is a really exciting project that we're applying here at Nardoo Hills. It's ongoing. So I guess at the heart of it is about trying to repair some of the damage done by historical land use, which has impacted how the ecosystem functions. At the heart of that is the soil and hydrological processes which support so much life, particularly in this mostly dry landscape, and importantly feed the natural wetland spring system that we have here. So we're trying to repair all this historical damage which has been done to have a meaningful impact on the hydrology in the soil. You need to do things that to do here is working at a scale which we're referring to as a watershed, or it's a micro water catchment. So say if you were sitting down in the bottom of a gully, you look up and you see all the slopes and all the minor little drainage lines. It's everything that when the rain falls, it falls into this basin. So we're trying to apply a range of restoration techniques across the entire watershed. So it's at a scale where we can actually have real positive impacts on those really complex processes. So what we're looking to do through a number of different stages, we're implementing things like we've removed old farm dams, which were holding back water, and instead of the dams, we've created leaky weirs, which do capture water, but they let it feed out of the system a lot slower. And in effect, they're creating like natural ponds which step down out of the valley. So instead of just rushing out in a rainfall event, they caught up, soak into the ground, and they move down to the next pond when they're overflowing, allowing the plants and animals to take them up. Alongside that, we're doing a bunch of revegetation work focusing on the missing shrub and wetland plant communities. We're using machinery to do some trial contour keyline ripping to, again, stop that water really sheeting off the surface. It hits these little micro barriers and it can get absorbed down. We're doing that on the slopes, and we're also putting structures in some of the valley floor drainage lines as well. It's all about, stopping that water just leaving the system without giving the plants and animals an opportunity to let it absorb into the ground. So we're doing all those things across quite a large area. So it's rather ambitious project, which is going to take us a couple of years to complete. But I think we're already starting to see some real positive change by starting to repair bits and pieces and pulling it all together. So it is a really cool project that, once we work on this watershed here at Spring Paddock, we're hoping to learn those lessons and apply them across our reserves, and bringing us back to other things that are happening on other reserves. Places like Walker are doing, working under the same principles of issues of erosion and water leaving the system. It's because of those historical land uses which have degraded the plant and animal communities. If you can slow the movement of water and bring back those missing vegetation communities, you can apply these same principles in lots of different landscapes. They certainly have big impacts in dry landscapes like here at Nardoo Hills, where we're semi-arid. Bulkamata, it's a bit more arid. Water is so important in these ecosystems, so you need to make the most of when it rains.
And I think even the grass cover can make a difference, can't it, to the stability of the soil?
Yeah. Absolutely. So what I mentioned before, some of our revegetation. What we've got here is a lot of cool season grasses. We don't have we're missing different species of the summer growing grasses. So real focus is bringing them back in, because we're going to see more summer rain in this part of the world. And if there's no vegetation to stop that rainfall sheeting off some of the hills, then we lose it. But if we put those summer grasses back in there, they've got that they can capture that water as it's moving across the surface. So that's a big focus.
Excellent. Sounds like lots of work. Now, of course, with all these projects and all this work happening on the reserves, how do we measure if we're being effective? Rowan, as ecologist, that's part of your brief, isn't it, to measure these things? Can you tell us about some of the monitoring programs?
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned before the bird surveys. They're undertaken annually across all of Bush Heritage reserves. So that kind of gives us a good understanding of how bird populations are fluctuating from year to year, and hopefully the abundances, species richness, and things like that improve on our reserves. For Dan's spring paddock work, we've got audio, and that they're taking recordings around peak activity periods of dawn and dusk for birds, and then into the evening for frogs. And we're working to develop species like diamond firetails that we think this project is particularly going to impact in a positive way. We are also working on a collaboration with Monash University and Free Clubs. They're installing soil sensors that tell us information about soil moisture content, soil temperature, and potentially in the future we will be adding in CO2 sensors to those, so we can understand a bit about the microbial activity in the soil, how much they're respiring and converting oxygen to CO2. On the reserves as well, similar to the bird surveys, we also do vegetation monitoring at fixed points throughout the reserves, aiming to repeat them every 3 years. So that tells us information about things like the shrub cover, the tree cover, what health the canopy's in. We also record stuff like the length of fallen timber on the ground, and then species richness in the ground layer, and how much bare ground, leaf litter, mosses and lichens are there on the ground layer. Some of Monique's work is focused on restoring those species that are really missing from the landscape. So Monique goes out and monitors every single plant that she plants, and she's been doing that on 6 month and annual basis. and that tells us really good information about where the plants that she has planted are surviving, because all we have to go on in many cases about where they should be planted is where the few isolated individuals of that species are left on reserve. But it might be just that happens to be the place that the plough missed year after year or something like that. So that might not be the favoured spot for that species on the reserve. It just so happens that that's all that's left. So by taking this information about where the plants Monique's planting are doing best, we're able to then use things like soil attributes and elevation and slope and things like that to figure out where additional plants that she plants in future seasons should go to give them the best chance of surviving.
Fantastic. A lot of work and a lot of data, I guess. Work with.
Yeah, I think I could do with two of me.
We all feel that, I think. We all feel that. Well, listen, the last segment I want to cover off is, of course, integral to all of Bush Heritage's work, wherever we operate in Australia. And in this Kara Wedderburn landscape, we've got a commitment to work side by side with traditional custodians, the Dja Dja Wurrung people. And I was able to catch up recently with Bambi Lees, our Aboriginal Partnerships Manager in Victoria, and have a chat about connection to country and the relationship we have with the Dja Dja Wurrung. So here's Bambi.
Hey Bambi, great to see you again. How you doing?
I'm well. Thanks, Matt.
Excellent, excellent. Listen, perhaps to start off, you could introduce yourself and explain what your role is in Bush Heritage.
Right. Okay. So I am the Aboriginal Partnerships Manager for Victoria, and my role is to facilitate the relationships, build relationships with the traditional owners, and, you know, introduce them to Bush Heritage, but also facilitate that access onto country. Yeah.
Indeed. And now Nardoo Hills is Dja Dja Wurrung country, isn't it? As are several other Bush Heritage properties in the region. Perhaps you could talk to us about how, you know, the importance of connection to country and having access to Nardoo Hills and the other properties, and how important that is for traditional owners.
Yeah. Well, you know, we say that people are born of the land and people are one. So for traditional custodians, it's extremely important for their health and well-being. So this feeling of connection, I think most of us that are properly viewing this today also have a connection with country and with the landscape. It gives us a sense of well-being. It's what nurtures me, and I can see it in their faces. I hear it in their voices, what connection means to them and how they feel about it. So, and I guess, you know, being able to reconnect gives them even more of a sense of a rekindled connection, something that hasn't happened for, you know, over 170 years in this area.
And it's also important, isn't it, culturally, because there's sacred sites, and at Mount Buckrabunyal, when we met last time, that's a very sacred site for them, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. But, you know, they will say to you that all of country is important, and they need to feel connected in order to maintain those laws, and to be able to keep up their duty of care, their cultural obligation to care for country, to maintain it.
And now Bush Heritage talks about healthy country protected forever, and we know forever is a long time, and we know that we're learning this, and that the traditional owners, the First Peoples of Australia, have had this cultural obligation to look after country forever. So from our stance, I know that Bush Heritage is looking to take a culturally led approach to facilitate those traditional custodial obligations and move forward together, you know, in partnership to look after the land. Perhaps you could tell us what that actually means in terms of what we're doing and collaborating with the Dja Dja Wurrung, because they're a strong group, aren't they? And we're well engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. That relationship has been nurtured over the last 10 years. I'm only fairly new to bush heritage, but I could see that the relationship had already existed. But that during that time, there's been a building up of capacity for both bush heritage and for Dja the Jara people, in order to be able to move into this space and become leaders on their country, to be able to speak for country and exercise their rights and interests. So you're right, Dja been working towards this for a long, long time, quite a few generations now. So one of the things we are doing, and we've spent the last 3 or 4 years, throw in COVID as well, in developing a right way approach to managing the landscape, our priority landscape. So we've developed, in collaboration with Jara, a strategic shared plan. It's called Warika Golkanu, Warika meaning to yarn, to talk, and Golkanu meaning to build together, to do it together. So rather than looking at individual reserves and managing them in isolation, we are taking an eagle's view, if you like, from the sky, looking across landscape. So that's bringing together our shared values, but also allowing bush heritage to lead in some areas, and then traditional custodians to lead in other areas of management. Yeah, really exciting stuff. We've spent a long time building that relationship, and we're just about ready to launch it.
That sounds very exciting, Bambi. Well, thanks for joining us and giving us that little bit of perspective, because it's so wonderful to know that we've got such strong support in the region, and for the large number of conservation tasks, as well as a lot of the cultural opportunities to look after the land together.
Yep. Thanks very much.
Pleasure. See you soon.
Well, that was a wonderful catch-up I had last week with Bambi Lees. Now, before we go into the Q&A session, I'd just like to welcome a special guest who's jumping online and is going to join us, and that's our new Bush Heritage CEO, Rachel Lowry. So Rachel should be coming up on our screens very shortly. And once she is, I will get her to make some announcements about some of the new exciting property acquisitions that are rolling through at the moment. Hi, Rachel.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Lovely to see you. Can I ask you, first of all, how are you settling into the Bush Heritage family that you're now in charge of? Must be very exciting.
Yeah, what a family to join. It has been exciting. It's been beautiful, actually. And thanks for inviting me along to celebrate this 20th anniversary. And congratulations to everyone that's made that possible. It's certainly worthy of celebration.
So, people will know, I suspect, about our Evelyn Downs acquisitions. We did a big fundraising drive, and our last webinar was about this. But there's even more news, isn't there? So please do share this news with everybody.
Yeah, what a time to be joining Bush Heritage, that I get to be able to share some of these incredible milestones with you all. So Evelyn Downs, in case anyone missed it, actually on my very second day in the job as the new CEO of Bush Heritage Australia, I had the great pleasure of announcing to all that were involved that we were able to settle that particular acquisition, which is 235,000 hectares of incredible landscapes, which takes our reserve spans from 1.2 to 1.4 million hectares, which in itself is another milestone worthy of celebration. And Evelyn Downs, whilst we're talking about scale, and I can see you've got some pictures there, it's not just about the 235,000 hectares, it's about connectivity, which, you know, equally is a context that I'm sure is being conveyed and celebrated today around Nardoo Hills and the importance of connectivity, because this particular acquisition has allowed us to link into IPAs and other reserve systems and join up 1.9 million hectares of landscape and deepen our partnerships with traditional custodians. So certainly worthy of celebration. Excited to now ensure everyone's captured that win and we don't just let that pass, because it was a huge effort from all involved, and it's plenty of work ahead as well. But I believe what I'm about to announce is the very first time we have made this announcement public, and it feels fitting to do it in this forum. We have also just managed to acquire the Sandstrom block in the Karakara Wedderburn. Now, this particular block does not have the same expanse footprint as Evelyn Downs. In fact, we're talking a more humble 159 hectares, but what it does do is join our J.G. Griffin and our John Douglas block and provide connectivity in a really important ecosystem, the ancient woodlands in the KKW area. So really exciting, and you're starting to see this theme coming through around connectivity, which is a key criteria being prioritised by Bush Heritage when we look at where we invest the precious resources that we have. So that's the Sandstrom property. We're looking forward to making that announcement and celebrating that acquisition more publicly soon. But you're the first to hear about it, and that has been enabled due to a really generous gift in will. So wonderful, wonderful news. And then, as if that's not enough, last week we've managed to take a step, and there's still more work to come here, but there's upcoming acquisitions. We will have some exciting news to announce in Western Australia soon. We've been working for many, many years at joining that Gondwana link vision and taking another step very soon, we hope, towards creating that link across the Fitzsterling ranges off the back of the incredible work that we've achieved in the past several years at Red Mort, where I had the opportunity to get up last November. Just the restoration efforts there are stunning. So more news to come on that front. We're not taking our eye off any of the states, but there's also some movement around acquisitions in Queensland as well. And of course, whilst we're celebrating these acquisitions, the real celebration is around the impact of how we're deepening our impact on reserve. So I might just finish off, if you allow me, Matt, by saying one thing I've been loving doing is asking people what some of their favourite memories are with Bush Heritage. And Nardoo Hills was where our previous president, Chris Grubb, when he was reflecting, and he really had to think about it when I asked, and he said the discovery of the robust greenhood, which we heard Monique talk about previously, was his favourite memory of the many, many years that he served Bush Heritage. So, you know, the fact that a species was once believed to be extinct, and with a bit of care, we have been able to manage that landscape and allow it to thrive and come back is in itself a worthy celebration. And it's great to be joining a team of people who see that as a worthy celebration, because, you know, what we're talking about today is not just 20 years, it's a celebration of the fact that one of the most threatened wooded ecosystem in Victoria is still standing after 83% of it having been cleared in our state because of the efforts of so many. So well done to all. And thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. And that was great to hear some of these stories. And it sounds like the boys here have got a little bit more work to do now if they've got a new block to deal with. So have either of you
Forward to joining you soon?
Yet? I guess you need to go. Yes.
Rowan's the lucky one.
Is he? Okay, fine. Well, we'll see if we can organise a swift tour later. Thanks, Rachel. That's great to hear. We've got this acquisition news from all over the country. And have some questions. If not, we'll answer them as best we can on those new acquisitions. And we already do have some very questions for the chaps here, so I will jump straight into them because we've covered a lot of ground today. And the first question that comes up is about that poison with the wheel cactus. Can you tell us, is that safe for insects and birds, and what's its mode of operation? Is that one for you, Dan?
I'll have a crack. So there's a number of different, we're certainly not using just one thing on the wheel cactus. There's a number of different things we're using. The mode of operation, that's testing my memory, but So we're doing a number of things. We're particularly at scale. You can foliar spray the plants with some of the higher level herbicides, but particularly with our volunteers, we focus mainly on using glyphosate is the one that we use to inject. There's also some harder herbicides that we use, but they're reserved for specialist contractors to apply. And myself. So yeah, there's a range of different things at our disposal. They are quite difficult, so we have to use quite high rates of these things. But yeah, we've got every tool at our disposal. We've even trialed recently using drones to spray these cactus from the sky, big heavy drones with spray packs. We're going to be trialing cultural fire to kill the cactus. Yeah, we're learning a lot in this space. And yeah, I think yeah, we're getting on top of it.
Fantastic. Thank you. A question, I'm not sure who's best to answer this, but there's a question about Juncus acutus, the sharp rush. Is that a weed for us, and how are we controlling it?
It is, unfortunately. It's as well as wheel cactus, it's probably the other nasty on the property, which is a real challenge. Like I described before, we have the natural wetland spring here at Nardoo Hills. And yeah, the spiny rush has made a real home for itself in there. It's a challenging one to deal with because it's often associated with water. The main way we're treating it is with herbicide, just spraying it with a combination of different chemicals. But yeah, there's also mechanical removal and also just chipping out the little ones with this hand labour. So it is wherever there's like a wet depression area on the property, we are finding it's coming up. But again, it's that constant pressure on the weed, using as many tools as we can throw at it. Yeah, we're seeing some positive results.
That's fantastic. A couple of questions now about how we work with farmers. The first one is to do with data and research. So Rowan, perhaps for you. And this is to do with how much we share data and whether the Farmers Federation is one of those organisations that benefits from the work we do. And I think that's probably linked to another question, which was how much is the regeneration work we're doing happening on neighbours' land? And is that something where there's an interest? So any reflections on how we're managing to work with the local landowners, particularly with data and with re-veg?
Yeah, I think we have a good communication with our direct neighbours. In some reserves that in Victoria, they're integral to us. Like in the past, JC Griffin, we've had to go across our neighbour's property to access it. So maintaining those close relationships with neighbours is important. And we do communicate some of our management activities with our direct neighbours. We also kind of host sort of some like local community events about some of our projects, and also we do have many of our volunteers that come out are members of the local community, so they get to see what we're doing firsthand on the reserve, and maybe take back some learnings from what they see us implementing. In terms of data sharing, it's not something I don't think we have any sort of anything formal in terms of like a data sharing policy with landholders at the moment. But I think through open communication, that's our best mode of communicating what we're doing on the reserves.
Yes, thank you. And certainly to add to that response, we've been developing partnerships with a number of big pastoral companies in other parts of the country where we're very much doing work to understand what the baseline conservation values are and what management is required to improve not only the primary production that those pastoralists get from their cattle, but also how can they look after the land as well. And of course, that's a joint data sharing operation and a joint conservation management. And that's something we've started pioneering in the last couple of years. And I suspect that will trickle through down to the local landscape level as well once we've learnt more about how conservation and agriculture can work well together, but just not here yet, perhaps. Okay, another question that came up was the summer grasses that were mentioned. Dan, I think you mentioned the importance of having summer grasses. There's a question about, is that something you can actively do revegetation for through replanting?
Yeah, you can. I guess, yeah, it's just it's a real focus of what we're trying to put back in our revegetation efforts through a lot of tube stock planting. So yeah, getting plants from nursery and planting them as quite strong, helping more kind of detailed work with going around to some of the surrounding neighbouring conservation reserves and harvesting some of the seed from their summer growing grasses that we don't have on our reserve but should have here, but they've been removed from historical processes, hand picking them and then just hand broadcasting them into areas where we want them to re-establish on the reserve. So it's mainly a combination of tube stock planting and just broadcasting seed and hoping that the conditions add up to something that's favourable and they establish. So yeah, they're the main pathways.
Excellent, thank you. There was another question we have here about the trees that we're doing in the Climate Ready Re-Veg programme. I think, Rowan, you mentioned that they were brought in from drier and more inland areas. Can you tell us what species, the prime species were that were involved in that?
Yeah, so there's two species involved in that trial, grey box, which is Eucalyptus microcarpa, and yellow box, Eucalyptus melliodora. And yeah, and we've kind of sourced the seed from various populations, mostly from New South Wales, but yeah, one provenance from South Australia, and yeah, trying to get that kind of northern and western extreme of the distribution for both of those species and capture the genetics in that and bring some of those genes onto Nardoo Hills.
Fantastic, thank you. And two more questions, I think, before we'll have to finish. It's another technical question for Rowan, which was, what's your methodology for doing the veg surveys? And do you have any comment on the condition score component? This sounds like a Dorothy Dixer question that's been planted by a member of staff. I can, Rowan.
So we have an in-house method that we use, developed by one of our who previously a senior ecologist and still now in the ag sector of our company. So it uses a suite of methods from small 1 meter quadrats. It has 20 by 50 meter quadrats for looking at things like canopy cover and tree health and stem density, things like that. And then line intercept transect for looking at shrub cover and structure that way. It doesn't align perfectly with the state government's habitat condition score card. And I guess there are pros and cons to both of them, and I'm not sure the exact reasons why Matt, the former senior ecologist, steered away from those, because it predates my time in the organisation. But certainly I think we collect a lot of different parameters that that are useful for informing habitat condition and can be aggregated up to give our own sort of overall habitat condition score.
Thanks, Rowan. Okay, I've got one last question. Rachel, I think, Matt, perhaps you're best to answer this one. And it's relating to our different approaches to different landscapes around the country. And the question is there any particular reason why we don't have any conservation reserves in our ownership in Northern Territory? And I suspect that question applies more broadly because of the different land tenures and the different amount of Aboriginal ownership of their own land that is the case across the country. So perhaps you could answer the question, why nothing in NT yet? It's an empty spot on the map.
Yeah, look, I asked the same question when I joined the organisation, and with an eye on time, the quick answer is that we take a science-based approach to the criteria and looking at underrepresentation. So you're right, there is an element of a number of ecological communities being captured in reserve systems at present. We also look at economies of scale where we have teams present that we can extend resources out to. And of course, at the moment, we are putting a lot of attention because of climate change in connecting to existing landscapes that we're investing in. So for those reasons, and there's probably others I've missed at the moment, those acquisition opportunities in NT that we have scoped from time to time haven't been moved upon, but it's not off the cards, and it is something we continue to scan. And we certainly do still have partnerships with traditional custodians up there, and we are looking at extending our agriculture and natural capital work up into NT as well. So hopefully that answers that. I know many of us have to run, as do I. Can I just very quickly thank you, Matt and Dan, Rowan, Monique and Bam for making this terrific celebration happen. Thanks to everyone that joined us as well. And if I can extend my thanks to Jaja Warung as well, the traditional custodians of Nardoo Hills. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Rachel. And don't go away, everybody else. Just a couple of last things I'm going to run through. Thanks to the whole team, as Rachel said, get this together. Thanks also to all of you who put their hands in their pockets and supported our acquisition fundraising for Evelyn Downs. It made a big difference. Just asking on the last webinar had the number of donations increasing dramatically in the couple of hours after that. So we know we made a difference, which is wonderful. We'd also like to flag that a couple of our nearby reserves are going to be having trips to them organised by one of my colleagues. So if you'd like to visit one of the reserves in this landscape, JC Griffin and John Douglas reserves have got trips being lined up, which are available on a first come, first served basis. The link will be in the chat. So please go there or direct to our website. And if any of you would like to volunteer, I believe, Dan, you're very open to having volunteers on site, not just stabbing cactus. Is that right?
Yeah, we've got lots of opportunities. I'm sure we'll find a job for any kind of skill set or experience. So yeah, always keep an eye out for opportunities on the Victorian reserves. There's plenty of them.
Fantastic. Thank you. And if you would like to, we'll also put a link up for how you can become a volunteer. We mention it every time. It's part of the Bush Heritage family. It's a wonderful experience to get out on country and do something that contributes to looking after and making healthy country that will last forever. So thanks for joining us today. As always, we'll have a closing slideshow. And we look forward to talking to you further. There'll be some webinars later in the year. And we're also going to be trialing a new deep dive format where we interview one of our wonderful students or PhD candidates or experts for just half an hour or so, and we find out exactly what their day is like. So you'll hear about that soon. So thanks for joining us today. Thanks as always to Megan for producing the show, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.